My daughter-in-law made me sit at the kids' table during her fancy party. I stayed there, but I announced her real credit card debt to all her guests. My name is Vivian Marsh. I am 79 years old, and I am telling you this story exactly the way it happened, because I think a lot of grandmothers out there will understand what I went through, and maybe some of you will feel a little less alone after hearing it. It started 3 weeks before the party. My son Marcus called me on a Sunday evening, his voice full of excitement, telling me that his wife, Isabel, was throwing a big anniversary celebration at their house, something she had been planning for months. He said it was going to be elegant. Catered food, a string quartet, nearly 60 guests, business partners, neighbors, old college friends, everyone who mattered in their social circle. He told me how proud he was of Isabel, how she had worked so hard to build this life they had. The big house, the fancy cars, the vacations she posted online every few months. I listened to him with a warm feeling in my chest, because that is what a mother does. She smiles when her son is happy, even when something inside her whispers that things are not quite right. I had always had a complicated relationship with Isabel, not hostile, never hostile, just distant, the kind of distance that exists between two people who are polite to each other but never truly close. She called me Vivian instead of Mom, which I never minded much. People have their own comfort levels. But there was always a wall between us, thin but solid, like glass you can see through, but never touch. I told myself it was generational, that young people today build relationships differently, and I accepted it. I raised Marcus to be respectful, and I taught myself to be respectful in return, even when respect was not always returned to me. On the day of the party, I arrived early because I wanted to help set up the way grandmothers do, folding napkins, arranging flowers, anything to feel useful and included. Isabel greeted me at the door with a tight smile, thanked me for coming, and told me the caterers had everything under control, that I should just relax and enjoy myself. I remember standing in her marble entryway holding a small gift I had brought, a photo album of Marcus as a baby that I had put together over months, and feeling like I was already in the way. The house was transformed. String lights hung across the backyard, tables covered in white linen, candles flickering in tall glass holders, a small stage where the quartet would later play. Waiters in black vests carried trays of appetizers I could not even pronounce. Isabel floated through the crowd in a deep emerald dress, laughing with guests, accepting compliments about her home, her taste, her success. She looked like something out of a magazine. And I will admit, for a moment, I felt proud watching her, proud that my son had married someone so admired. Then came the seating arrangement. I found the table chart near the entrance to the backyard. Elegant calligraphy listing names under table numbers. I searched for mine. Table 1 was reserved for Isabel's parents and her closest business associates. Table 2 held Marcus's college friends and their spouses. I kept scanning, moving further down the list, until finally I found my name, Vivian Marsh, written under a small table near the side of the yard, close to the snack station, a table meant for children. Ethan and Grace, my 2 grandchildren, ages 7 and 9, were seated there with me, along with 3 other kids from neighboring families, complete with paper plates, juice boxes, and crayons scattered across the tablecloth instead of the fine china everyone else was using. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my name written in that beautiful handwriting, placed at a table meant for children, who needed coloring books to stay occupied during a long dinner. I am not a woman who embarrasses easily, and I told myself there must be some mistake. So I found Isabel near the drink table and asked her gently if perhaps the seating chart had an error. She looked at the chart, looked at me, and said the tables for adults were already full with people relevant to Marcus's career and her business connections, and that she thought I would actually enjoy sitting with the children since I always seemed to love spending time with them anyway. She said it with a smile, the kind of smile that is designed to make an insult sound like a compliment, the kind of smile that dares you to react so she can call you sensitive. I did not react. I smiled back, thanked her for thinking of me, and walked to the children's table, where Ethan immediately hugged my arm and asked me to help him color a picture of a dinosaur. Grace poured me orange juice in a plastic cup shaped like a star, and I sat there, 79 years old, in a dress I had chosen carefully for this occasion, surrounded by paper napkins and crayon wrappers, while 60 guests dined on filet mignon under string lights just a few tables away. I remember what I was wearing that night, a soft lavender dress I had bought specifically for this party, along with a string of pearls that had belonged to my own mother. I had gone to the hairdresser that morning, had my nails done, had spent nearly 2 hours getting ready because I wanted to look my best for my son's important night. I remember catching my reflection in a dark window as I walked toward the children's table, an elderly woman dressed for an elegant dinner, sitting down among crayons and juice boxes, and feeling a strange, quiet grief settle into my chest. The kind of grief that comes not from tragedy, but from small, accumulated humiliations. A woman I did not recognize, one of Isabel's friends, I assumed, walked past the children's table at one point, glanced at me, and asked with genuine confusion whether I was working as one of the hired sitters for the evening. I told her gently that I was actually the groom's mother, and I watched her face shift into an expression of pity mixed with awkwardness, the kind of look that makes you want to disappear into the ground. She apologized quickly and walked away, but the sting of that moment stayed with me longer than I expected. I want you to understand something before I continue. I was not angry because I was sitting with children. I love my grandchildren more than almost anything on this earth, and there is no table I would rather sit at than one filled with their laughter. I was angry because of the message behind the placement, the quiet, deliberate reminder that in Isabel's world, I was not important enough to matter, that I was an obligation to be managed rather than a mother-in-law to be honored. I had spent years babysitting on short notice, cooking meals when Isabel was too tired to cook, sending money when Marcus mentioned they were tight one particular month, all without complaint, all without asking for recognition. And this was the recognition I received. I stayed at that table for nearly 2 hours. I helped Ethan finish his dinosaur drawing. I listened to Grace tell me about her school project on volcanoes. I ate the same chicken nuggets and fruit cups the children were served. And I laughed with them more genuinely than I had. Laughed with any adult at that party in years. But underneath that laughter, something in me was calculating, remembering, connecting pieces of information I had been collecting without even meaning to. You see, 3 months earlier, Marcus had called me late one night, his voice tired and worried, and told me something he probably should not have told me, something he needed to say out loud to someone who would not judge him. He told me that Isabel had secret credit cards, 4 of them, opened without his knowledge, and that the combined debt had reached nearly $80,000. He told me she had been using them to fund the very lifestyle everyone admired, the designer clothes, the luxury handbags, the vacations posted online, all of it built on debt hidden from her own husband. He told me he found out by accident when a collections letter arrived at the house addressed to her, and when he confronted her, she begged him not to tell anyone, promised she would fix it quietly, promised it would never happen again. Marcus, being the kind man he is, agreed to keep it private to help her pay it down slowly to protect her reputation among their friends and family. I remember sitting in my kitchen that night, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my son's voice, crack in a way it had not cracked since he was a teenager going through his first heartbreak. He told me he felt foolish, that he had married a woman who presented herself as put together and financially responsible, only to discover an entire hidden life of spending he never knew existed. He told me he loved Isabel deeply, that he believed in second chances, that he did not want to blow up their marriage over money, when so many marriages survive worse. I told him that love and honesty are supposed to walk together, and that hiding something this large from a spouse was not a small stumble. It was a pattern. But I also told him I would respect his decision to handle it privately, because it was his marriage, not mine. What Marcus did not know, what I never told him, was that I had done a little quiet digging of my own after that phone call. I am an old woman, but I am not a foolish one, and curiosity got the better of me. I found a stack of mail in Marcus and Isabel's mudroom one afternoon when I was babysitting Ethan and Grace. Mail Isabel had clearly been hiding from her husband. Letters from at least 2 collection agencies. Statements from cards I recognized from department stores she frequented. I did not open anything that was not mine to open, but I saw enough on the envelopes to understand that the $80,000 Marcus knew about was very likely only part of a much larger picture. I said nothing, tucked that knowledge away quietly, and waited the way grandmothers often do, watching everything, saying very little. I had carried that secret for 3 months, saying nothing, respecting my son's wishes, hoping the situation would resolve itself and that Isabel would learn something from the fear of almost being exposed. But sitting at that children's table, watching her glide around her fake, borrowed elegance while I was tucked away like an inconvenience, something inside me shifted. I am not proud of everything that happened next, but I am not ashamed of it either, and I will tell you exactly what occurred. Around 8 in the evening, the quartet paused between songs, and Marcus stood up near the center of the yard, tapping his glass gently to get everyone's attention. He wanted to give a toast, a sweet speech about Isabel, about their years together, about how grateful he was for the life they had built. Guests quieted down, raised their glasses, smiled warmly at the couple standing together near the stage. Isabel stood beside him glowing, one hand resting on his arm, her emerald dress catching the string lights above them. The picture of a woman who had everything under control. Her parents watched proudly from table 1. Her business partners raised their glasses in anticipation. For a moment, I watched the whole scene from my little table on the side, the paper plates and juice boxes in front of me, and I thought about simply staying quiet, letting the toast happen, letting the night end the way Isabel had planned it down to the smallest detail. Grace tugged on my sleeve and asked if I wanted to hear her joke about a volcano, and I almost laughed and turned my attention fully back to her, almost let the moment pass entirely. But then I looked at Marcus, standing there so earnestly, about to pour his heart out in front of 60 people for a marriage he did not fully understand the truth of, and something inside me refused to let the night end on a lie, dressed up in string lights and candlelight. I am not a woman who acts on impulse often. I have spent 79 years learning patience, but in that moment, patience felt like complicity, and I could not sit in it any longer. I stood up from the children's table. I did not plan the exact words in advance, but I knew, walking across that yard in my sensible heels, that I was done being invisible in a life I had helped make possible. I approached the small stage area, and Marcus, seeing his mother walk up, smiled and reached his hand toward me, assuming I wanted to add a few kind words to his toast, the way mothers sometimes do. I took the small microphone the string quartet had used to announce their song titles, and I turned to face the crowd. I told them I was so happy to be here celebrating Marcus and Isabel, and that a marriage built on honesty is the only kind of marriage that lasts, which is why I felt it was important, standing here among everyone who cared about this family, to mention something about honesty. I said that just months ago, this beautiful home, these string lights, this catered dinner, existed alongside $80,000 of secret credit card debt that Isabel had hidden from her own husband, debt accumulated through 4 cards. None of us knew about until a collections letter arrived at their door. The yard went silent in a way I have never experienced before or since. Glasses stopped midair. Someone near the back gasped audibly. Isabel's face drained of color so quickly. I genuinely feared for a moment that she might faint. Her parents, seated at table 1, exchanged a look of pure horror. Marcus stood frozen beside me, his mouth slightly open, unable to process what had just happened in front of every important person in his life. I set the microphone down gently, thanked everyone for having me, and walked back to the children's table, where Ethan asked me if I wanted to see his second dinosaur drawing. I said yes, and I sat down, and I helped him choose colors for a triceratops while the entire party behind me dissolved into whispers and quiet chaos. Isabel did not speak to me for the rest of that night. Guests began leaving early, offering awkward excuses about babysitters and early mornings. The string quartet packed up their instruments quietly, sensing the celebration had ended long before the scheduled time. Marcus drove me home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned pale. And when we finally pulled into my driveway, he asked me, in a voice I had never heard from him before, why I would do something like that. I told him the truth. I told him I did not do it to hurt Isabel, though I knew it would hurt her. And I did not do it out of jealousy or bitterness over some trivial seating chart, though the seating chart was the spark that lit something already smoldering. I told him I did it because I was tired of being treated as an inconvenience in a family I had sacrificed for, tired of watching a woman build a fake image on secrets while I was pushed aside as if I did not deserve a seat among adults, tired of protecting a lie that was slowly poisoning my son's trust in his own marriage. I told him that sometimes the truth needs to be spoken loudly because whispered truths get buried, and buried truths eventually rot everything around them. Marcus did not respond that night. He simply nodded, said goodnight, and drove away. I did not hear from him for 9 days. Those 9 days were some of the hardest of my life. I worried I had permanently damaged my relationship with my son, that I had chosen pride over family, that I had let anger speak louder than love. I thought about Ethan and Grace, wondering if I would still be allowed to see them, wondering if Isabel would use this as the final excuse to distance me from my grandchildren completely. I sat in my quiet house, replaying that moment on stage over and over, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. I called Marcus twice during those 9 days, and both times the call went to voicemail. I did not leave a message either time because I did not know what to say that would not sound like an excuse. My neighbor Patricia, who has known me for over 20 years, came by on the 5th day with a casserole and sat with me at my kitchen table while I told her the whole story. She listened without judgment, and when I finished, she simply asked me one question: whether I regretted standing up and speaking the truth. I sat with that question for a long time before answering, and I told her no, I did not regret the truth itself, only the possibility that it might cost me my relationship with my own grandchildren. Grace called me on the 7th day, using Isabel's phone, her small voice asking why I had not come to visit in so long. Whether I was sick, whether I still loved her and Ethan. I told her I loved them both more than anything in this world, that I had simply been very busy, and I fought to keep my voice steady so she would not hear the tears building behind my words. That phone call broke something loose in me, a fear I had been carrying quietly since the night of the party, the fear that speaking the truth out loud had cost me the two people I loved most. On the 10th day, Marcus showed up at my door unannounced, looking exhausted, older somehow than he had looked just a week and a half earlier. He sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where he used to do his homework as a boy, and he told me everything that had happened since the party. He told me Isabel had finally confessed the full truth, not just the $80,000 he already knew about, but nearly $40,000 more in additional debt she had continued, accumulating even after promising to stop, debt she had hidden even from him during their supposedly private repayment plan. He told me the public exposure, as humiliating as it was, had forced a conversation between them that years of private conversations had failed to produce. He told me Isabel had finally agreed to real financial counseling, to full transparency, to closing the secret accounts for good. He told me he was still angry with me, that the way I chose to reveal it was harsh in public and had embarrassed people who did not deserve to be dragged into their marriage's problems. And I accepted that criticism because he was right about the method, even if he understood the reason behind it. But he also told me something I will never forget. He said that sitting at that party, watching me walk to the children's table without complaint, without a single word of protest, made him realize just how long I had been quietly accepting disrespect in his household. Disrespect he had been too blind or too busy to notice. Isabel called me 2 weeks later. It was not an easy call for either of us. Her voice was shaky, careful, stripped of the polished confidence I had always seen her wear like armor. She told me she was sorry, not just for the seating arrangement, but for years of small dismissals she had never fully acknowledged. The way she rarely used the word mom. The way she made me feel like a guest in my own son's life rather than a permanent part of his family. She told me the humiliation of that night, as painful as it was, had forced her to look honestly at the person she had become. Someone obsessed with appearances, someone who had built an entire identity on things she could not actually afford. Financially or emotionally. She told me something else that surprised me, that she had grown up in a household where money was always tight, where her own mother clipped coupons and shopped at thrift stores while pretending everything was fine in front of neighbors, and that she had promised herself as a young girl she would never live that way again, never let anyone see her struggle. She said that promise had quietly turned into something unhealthy over the years, a need to project success even when the numbers behind the scenes told a very different story. Hearing her explain this, I felt something shift in me, not an excuse for what she had done, but an understanding of the fear that had driven her there. I told her that I understood the desire to hide struggle, that my own generation had been taught the same lesson, but that hiding struggle from the people who love you only multiplies it in the dark. We talked for almost an hour that day, longer than we had ever spoken on the phone in the 8 years she had been part of our family. By the end of the call, we were both crying, though neither of us said it out loud, the kind of quiet crying you can hear in someone's breathing even through a phone line. I told her I forgave her, and I meant it, though forgiveness did not erase the memory of sitting at a table with crayons, and juice boxes while feeling smaller than I had felt in years. I told her that respect is not something you perform for an audience. It is something you practice quietly every single day, in the small decisions nobody else is watching. I told her that if she wanted a real relationship with me, we would have to build it slowly, honestly, the way real trust is always built, brick by brick, not through fancy parties and expensive centerpieces. It has been almost a year since that night. Isabel and I are not close in the way some mothers and daughters-in-law are close, but something has shifted between us, something real. She calls me mom now, hesitantly at first, but it has become natural over time. She invited me to sit beside her at Ethan's school recital last spring, an ordinary folding chair in a school gymnasium, nothing fancy at all, and it meant more to me than any seat at any elegant party ever could. The debt has been paid down significantly, the secret accounts closed permanently, and Marcus tells me their marriage feels more honest now than it has in years, built on truth instead of borrowed appearances. Last month, Isabel hosted a much smaller gathering, just family, a simple dinner to celebrate Marcus's birthday. There was no seating chart, no calligraphy, no separate table for children tucked away near the snacks. I sat right beside her at the head of the table, Ethan and Grace across from us, Marcus at the other, and carving a roast chicken he had cooked himself instead of hiring caterers. Isabel raised her glass that evening and made a small toast, nothing elaborate, just a few honest words about gratitude, about family, about learning that a full table matters more than a beautiful one. She looked at me when she said it, and I felt for the first time in years that I truly belonged in that house, not as an obligation to be managed, but as a mother to be honored. I think often about the version of that night that could have happened if I had simply stayed quiet at the children's table, finished my juice box, smiled politely, and driven home carrying my hurt silently the way I had carried so many small hurts before. I think about how easy it would have been to swallow it, to protect the peace, to let Isabel's secret continue, growing in the dark while everyone around her admired a life that was not real. I do not know if that version of the story would have ended in disaster eventually, or if it simply would have continued quietly for years, the way so many family secrets do, until something far worse forced the truth into the open. I only know the version I chose, and I know it led us, painfully but honestly, to a better place than we started. Grace still asks me to help her draw dinosaurs sometimes, though now we usually do it at my kitchen table over cookies I bake myself. No crayons scattered across fine linen required. Ethan is 10 now, and he still remembers that party, though what he remembers is simply that his grandma sat with him and helped him color. Nothing about the speech, nothing about the scandal, just the simple memory of being loved and included by someone who chose to sit beside him rather than above him. I think about that night often, and I still do not regret standing up and speaking that truth out loud, even though I understand why some of you listening might think I went too far. Maybe I did, but I have learned that being 79 years old means you run out of patience for pretending, for smiling politely while being quietly erased from the family you helped build. Sometimes the loudest truths are the only ones anyone actually hears. So that is my story, from start to finish, exactly as it happened, exactly as I lived it. I hope it reminded you of your own grandmother somewhere, or maybe reminded you to call her this week, to ask her how she's really doing, to make sure she has a real seat at your table, not just a place near the door. I am 79 years old now, and I have learned that respect is never something you should have to beg for from the people who claim to love you. I have learned that silence, no matter how polite, can sometimes protect the very things that are quietly hurting the people we love most. And I have learned that forgiveness is possible even after the harshest truths are spoken, as long as everyone involved is willing to sit down afterward and actually listen. Isabel and I are not perfect. Our relationship is still a work in progress, but it is honest now. And honest has always mattered more to me than elegant. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. Never let anyone convince you that your presence is only worth a table in the corner. You have earned your seat at every table you have ever helped build. Through every sacrifice, every late night, every quiet act of love nobody thanked you for. Do not let fancy lights and expensive dinners fool you into thinking a beautiful party means an honest one. Sometimes the truest, warmest seat in the house is the one covered in crayons, surrounded by the people who love you without any conditions attached. Every time I tell this story, I think about how strange it is that One small seating chart could unravel so much truth, could change the direction of an entire family for the better, could teach a grandmother in her 70s that her voice still mattered when she chose to use it. I do not tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because I believe someone out there listening tonight needs permission to speak their own truth, even when their hands are shaking, even when the whole room goes silent, even when they are afraid of what might happen after the words leave their mouth. Now tell me, where are you watching this from tonight? Comment your city down below. I would love to see how far this story traveled. And if you love your grandma, if this story touched something in you even a little bit, make sure you like this video, subscribe for more stories just like this one, and share it with a friend who needs to hear it today.